I'd like to call the Tuesday, July 1st, 2014 Papillion City Council meeting to order. Ms. Buller, would you please take the roll?
Florence. Here. Mumgard. Here. Gaines. Here. Glover. Jaworski. Here. Klug. Here. Stubbe. Here. Ingberg. Here.
Thank you. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
That is correct.
And a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in the council chambers. I've got one presentation. I'm going to come around. I want to give a special recognition. Tim Kocha, who's coming up. Most of you probably know him. Tim's a high school teacher, and he's a coach and a part-time baseball umpire, but he's also a part-time employee for the city during the summer. And 1994, I think Marty hired him, about right, as a part-time summer employee. So it's been 20 years ago, and he's been coming back every summer. And during that time, most of his duties have been with the park department around the ball field preparation. But Tim's got a fantastic eye for detail when it comes to that. Anything related to the fields, you see how good those look. Most of that's under Tim, taking care of the entire things. And I think we've got a reputation for probably having some of the best venues in the metro area or in the region because of Tim's work and his eye to detail. We are constantly being complimented by both local and traveling teams about how nice our fields are kept. And again, those accolades are a direct result of Tim's work. But beyond that, Tim's actually, when he's working, he's been a mentor to a lot of the area youth who have come here probably for their first or second summer job. He works really hard and strives to make the city look great, and we just don't recognize long tenured employees enough, especially summer employees who just come back year after year after year. Tim's more than just a part-time worker. He's a real mentor to a lot of people, and when somebody wants to be trained on how to do the job right the very first time, they're usually sent to Tim to learn that. But I think the thing that really woke us up about Tim's dedication, and one of the reasons we wanted to recognize him, is after 20 years, a very real example is just this last Papillion Days. I think it was your anniversary, wasn't it? Yeah. So his anniversary was over Papillion Days, and he chose to put off anniversary celebration so he could be at Papillion Days to make it look special and make it great. Tim, you're just a great special part of the community, and want to thank you for it. Thank you. Want to say a few words? Tony.
Well, the mayor pretty much stole my thunder. But the one thing, I pretty much grew up with Tim Kocha. We ran in different circles, but I think you're a little older than me. But the Kocha name is synonymous with public education in Papillion. And when I started working with the Parks Department 7 years ago, Tim was that employee that I was able to send young people to. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with young men like Tom James, giving them their first jobs out of high school or while they're in high school. And I always like to try to throw them with somebody who is a mentor and someone who knows how to do a job well from start to finish, and that's Tim. So I just want to say thanks, Tim, for sticking with us, and really appreciate your hard work.
Now, a few more years.
A few more? There we go. I'm coming back.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. So we talk a lot about this being a special place and having great employees, but really just wanted to put a face to the reality of that. And again, Tim, thank you very much for all you've done for Papillion over the years. Dan, administrator's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm not sure, Tim, do you want to introduce your daughter? Is that your daughter with you, or do you have somebody with you? No. All right. Begin my report this evening, Mr. Mayor and council, with an update on the city budget process. This is a time of the year where a lot of staff time is dedicated towards meeting the goals and objectives of the council. As you recall, in April we met as a collective group, and we've been putting that product together. And I'm pleased to report at this point that we, at least as of noon today, have a draft document that I think accomplishes most of the goals that everybody had. Certainly not everything, but most of the important things. And we're able to present a draft to you that represents no property tax increase in doing so. So that's a lot of work on the department heads. They do the lion's share of that. Now, the council role, we'll be finalizing that in the next couple of weeks, and the plan is on July 16th to distribute it to the council members for a more thorough review. That'll give you until August 1st, when the budget is actually introduced as an ordinance. So there's a public hearing in the middle of August, and then an adoption for the budget, the first meeting in September. So I preempt that a little bit to let you know and encourage you again, if there is something in there that you want to make sure gets addressed, this is the fourth quarter of getting that in, but certainly enough time to do that. So give me a call. I'll be glad to brief you on the specifics of that. We did meet today with the Budget Advisory Committee. Councilman Florence, Mayor Black sit on that committee that's designed as part of the interlocal agreement for the fire merger with the Rural Fire District, City of La Vista, and City of Papillion. And that particular project, that was pretty interesting, and certainly credit to Chief Bose and Nancy. I think last July we made projections on what it would cost to do this. And I think sometimes people are cynical about government's ability to do accurate projections. We are within $26,000 of where we thought we would be last year, and the ratios are almost the same with a percentage of cost across the jurisdiction. So certainly on Chief Bose, I mean, that was a monumental task he took on the last year, and to be that close on a multi-million-dollar multi-agency agreement speaks well of certainly Bill and Nancy, and I'm sure they got people under them that they would defer the credit to. But I think that's very interesting. That comes within just really a few hundredths of a percent of meeting a budget we thought we could do before we were even formed. Second thing, Mr. Mayor and Council, the Papillion Civil Service Commission met yesterday, selected a consultant to lead them with the process for the selection of Chief Halous when he retires at the end of the year. The timeline that we'll be working with is we hope to have a new chief selected and on board by January 5th of 2015. That's a little bit compressed, but I'll be working with the commission and the consultant here over the next few months to work through that process and get that name up to you folks. Conclude my report. For those of you that aren't aware, the City Fitness Challenge ended April 1st. Some of us can wear solid shoes now and maybe not have blisters on our feet. Really a fun project this year. Jeff Thompson won. Jeff averaged over 90 days. He took 4.1 million steps since April 1st. That converts to over 20 miles every day that he either walked or ran for 90 straight days without a day off, coming in on average going in. So he's first place to Jim Carrey. Little story.
He might find Forrest Gump somewhere out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, mentioning Forrest Gump, nice segue. We didn't even practice that on our city, on the website that tracks all of this electronically. The top stepper, it was a little over 75,000 steps in a single day, and that is a little bit over 30 miles in one day. And that is Brian Craig, our chief building official, and Brian's little moniker is Forrest Gump, Run Forrest, on the website, so he won that. Deputy Chief Jones, he averaged just right at 20 miles per day. He came in second. And one of your very own actually cracked the top 5 at 4th, Councilman Jaworski. He did 2.7 million steps since April 1st, and that's an average of over 15 miles every day for 90 days. And so keep wearing your Fitbits, and we're actually going to do a recognition. You're all invited July 10th. There's an employee appreciation luncheon and a wellness recognition luncheon in City Park. It starts at 11 o'clock. We're going to hand out some plaques to the winners and some other things. So thank you, council members and mayor, for your support of that. We couldn't have done it without you and the attention. I think hopefully we'll see some lower health care rates over the course of time. So that, yeah. I was third, actually, but Jeff reminds me I was third. He said my plaque says I am third, but I challenged Jeff to beat me, and he did that. So that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion.
Motion by Councilwoman Klug, second by Councilman Jaworski. Mr. Mumgarde.
Yes, I'd like to pull item C11, please.
C11's pulled. Do we have any proponents? I think this would be a good time for Kim and Bill to come up. Items C5 through C10 are some special designated liquor licenses, actually 6 of them, that the Twisted Vine is pulling for a number of businesses. Be a great time for you guys to give an overview of what's going on.
Yeah, Kim Ehlers, Downtown Business Association President and owner of Kajamas. We are really excited to be partnering to come up, as you guys know, we're working hard for summertime events that community can come out and enjoy. So our first annual Sip and Walk is scheduled for July 24th. With the next 2 slated for August 21st and September 18th. These are all Thursday evenings. Glasses are currently being designed. We're going to go ahead for this time and follow up with our Downtown Business Association logo, removing the Business Association member and just keeping historical Downtown Papillion. We'll pass this around so you guys can see that. We want to, as we go forward each year, if this is successful, bring in different aspects of other historical locations in Downtown Papillion, maybe one time featuring the water tower, different views of downtown, so each year there's a different element of history going on to our glasses. Participants will have the opportunity to purchase tickets in advance for $10 or $15 the day of the event. They'll receive their glass, they'll receive their authentic wrist bracelet showing we've checked IDs, as well as their Sip and Walk card, which will tell them the designated locations that are going to be where they will follow. 6 businesses, are going to participate. Each business, that's their time to welcome guests, tell them a little bit about their business, specials they may have going on. They will have a doorman at their door as well as a dump bucket, ensuring no alcohol will leave the premises onto the streets. We will also have professionally trained alcohol and wine specialists at each one of our businesses that will be hosting the pours. Upon completing the card, we're going to encourage all guests to return to Twisted Vine we're going to have wine, cheese, crackers, refreshments for them to enjoy, and they will be able to deposit their completed card for prize drawings. Our big goal right now is awareness. We've got flyers being made right now. We're focusing on our Downtown Business Association Facebook page as well as our individual business Facebook page, and Tony's going to love this. We're working on a banner. So Tony's turned into our banner helper. So we so appreciate that help. And I want Bill to fill in a little more of the details on the actual wine event.
So Kim has pretty much covered just about everything with the event.
You want to introduce yourself?
I'm sorry, Bill A. Gartner with Twisted Vine. What we've talked about is July 24th being the first event that we're doing for the Sip and Walk, and as Kim mentioned, with creating some awareness in the downtown businesses. What we intend to do with the actual event is, as Kim mentioned, have trained individuals at each location to make sure that we're monitoring what's going on down there, as well as educate people to the wines that we're serving, and using one of our distributors, and he'll be supplying individuals to help us with that event. As we mentioned, the first event is July 24th. We do have our caterer's license submitted, so we can look forward into the rest of the summer. We would like to do 3 events throughout the course of the summer, but right now with the application on the special designated permit under Twisted Vine for this event, but going forward, our intentions are to carry it under our caterer's license.
Appreciate it. Any council questions? Thank you very much for all you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion? Mr. Mumgarde.
I see there's the recommendation to waive the $60 per day occupation tax.
That's correct. That's because of they do have they have applied for the caterer's license, and that's in process. And so knowing that's the intent, because they don't have that yet, they have to go through the individual 6 processes, but knowing they've begun that process, we thought it was just appropriate to support a waiver.
Okay, I'll support the waiver because of the activity that's going on, although I don't see that the catering license makes any difference. So I guess I'll just say that, well, I'll support the waiver of the occupation tax because this is a civic organization and the activity that's involved is more of a citywide city promotion rather than promotion of your actual organization. I guess I don't want nonprofit organizations to think they can come in and we'll waive the occupation tax for each of them. they're a different animal than you are. So that's where I'm drawing the line.
And I think your logic is fair, because I think there's examples of some neighboring towns that are doing very similar things, and the city has actually pulled the permit. In this case, Twisted Vine is pulling it, so I think your logic is fair. Any other council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item C11, Resolution R140110, a resolution to approve the appointment of Susan McCalman to the Library Board of Trustees for a 4-year term from July 2014 to July 2018. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Councilman Gaines. Second by Councilman Mumgard. Proponent, Ms. McCalman is here. Mr. Mumgard, do you want to say
Yes,
something?
Ms. McCalman, would you come forward, please, and introduce yourself?
My name is Susan McCalman, and I am here to thank Mayor Black for the nomination for the Board of Trustees for the library. Does anybody have any questions or anything?
Just want to thank you for stepping up. People are not aware, McCalman's lived in the community a long time, and you've actually, two of your kids worked at the library. And
absolutely.
she's also a small business owner in Papillion. They're very involved, so thank you for stepping up.
Sure, thank you.
And I'll just say that Susan and I worked together to organize a youth competition for a number of years, and I can personally attest that she's much more organized than I ever will be. And she can step into that position in the library and be an asset to the library board. So thank you, Susan.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any opponents? Nobody's stepping up. Any council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schroeder, thank you as well. Next is item E1, Ordinance 1689, an ordinance to amend Chapter 92, Article 3, Section 15, Subsection A of the Papillion Municipal Code, having to do with the adoption of the National Fire Protection Association Life Safety Code 101, to amend Chapter 100, Section 5, Subsection J of the Papillion Municipal Code, having to do with unsafe buildings, and to provide for an effective date. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Do we have proponents? Do we have any opponents? And if you'd state your name for the record.
I'm gonna mess this up, Eliza. Good evening, Council. Todd Arney, 104 Windsor Drive, Papillion, Nebraska. I want to thank you for your time today. Councilman Florence, thank you for the correspondence back and forth this week. I know we didn't get a chance to really hook up, but thank you for listening to me a little bit. So I just want to start tonight. I'm not here to oppose Papillion seeking delegated authority. In fact, I'm the guy who suggested this several years ago when I was here with the city with Chief Bose. But I am here to speak out against the adoption of the NFPA 101 2000 edition all by itself. It's a huge mistake by itself. Let me give you a little history on fire code in general. History of the NFPA 101. Life Safety Code originated in 1913. What's unusual about the Life Safety Code compared to other codes is it applies to existing structures as well as new structures. So when a code like this is adopted, existing structures have to comply. Now there could be a grace period in place, which I did not see in the staff report or in the resolution. There's a grace period, but existing structures do have to comply. In my opinion, this adoption goes against Papillion's business-friendly processes and directly complicates the newly implemented downtown building guidelines, which again I was very involved in. And I think it really makes it practically impossible for city staff to enforce both sets of regulations, and even more complicated for the designers. A little bit more history just on the 2000 edition itself. It was adopted by the NFPA in 1999. It was written prior to the standardization of several codes. In the mid-1990s, there was 3 national code groups around the United States, and in 2000 they adopted and issued a national standard called the International Code Series. So again, this was written prior to the standardization of codes. I think the big issue with that is, it was written 15 years ago and it doesn't account for advances in building components and technology since it was written. I'll turn now a little bit just about the Papillion's adoption history. So again, I was with the city when this process began. City staff met with architects and engineers that specialize in fire code design and regulations a little over a year ago, and there were several issues discussed about the current process. And at that time, obviously, the state fire marshal was doing the inspections and plan reviews, and several takeaways from that meeting. But the two biggest ones, I guess, that stick in my mind are, the biggest issue facing the designers and the business industry is trying to use a code that is 14 years old with the modern codes that are out there. It makes it very, very difficult. The other note was that Papillion needs to adopt alternatives similar to other authorities having jurisdictions. So I'll turn a little bit now about the state requirement. The staff report mentions that Papillion is required to adopt the NFPA 101 Life Safety Code as a minimum standard, which I agree with. All the jurisdictions in the state that have delegated authority have done that, but what it fails to mention is that the majority of those have also adopted an edition of the International Fire Code. The International Fire Code is a companion of the current 2006 International Building Code, which is what we have adopted in Papillion. Together they provide for greater flexibility and greater life safety than the code that's from 15 years ago. And I'll just put up quick here, let's see. This is in the handout you guys have, but just so people can see here. So here's just a brief comparison of the other jurisdictions with delegated authority in Nebraska. So as you can see, all the ones that have delegated authority are all paid fire departments. They all have some version of the International Building Code adopted, all of them except for Scottsbluff have adopted International Fire Code along with their adoption. 2003 is what Omaha uses, 2009 is what Lincoln uses, so kind of some examples there. Next I'll talk a little bit about, best of the best. Papillion, I'm proud to be a citizen of Papillion. We're recognized as one of the best places to live, but in my opinion, adopting it this way and doing it this way will put us behind the competition. Again, if you look there, this poll was pulled from the last CNN Money Magazine poll, which Papillion was number 8. As you can see, every single community ahead of us has an International Fire Code adoption. Now, some are at the state level, but they all have an International Fire Code adoption. As you can see, the oldest one is 2006. So several years and several versions of code, and things have changed there. So that should be it on that. I guess next I'd say, what's the rush? This process started more than a year ago, and now today we want to waive the third reading. Overall, the approval process seems very, very rushed to me. Introduction was on June 16th. Planning Commission hearing was on the 25th. And tonight we're asking for second and third reading, 7-1. That's 13 days. That was all we've had to have any input or discussion on this. So, from my experience working here, I was here just over 6 years with the city. The only time we've ever waived readings, in my opinion, is when we have overall financial gain for the city. Obviously, there's no financial gain to be had here. Probably the biggest one why I wanted to come speak out tonight, and my good friend Marty Lemming, my neighbor's going to hate me for this, but I completed a fire code plan review myself last week. I came in, did a public records request, got the drawings. The new building that we are going to build does not comply with this code that we're getting ready to adopt today. But it would pass the 2009 Life Safety Code or the 2006 International Fire Code. I find it very, very hard to adopt a regulation and force the designers and builders to comply with it, but then we don't comply with it ourselves. I feel that in closing, truly it's just a lack of education and maybe just some arrogance from the city leaders that have gotten us to this point. I've been really, really trying to find something that would resonate as to why I feel this way, and here's what I kind of come up with. So, Mayor, we all know what you do for your day job. So I want to end with this question. Would you loan money to a business today that came in with a business plan that was written 15 years ago? Yeah. With everything that's happened, you would still do that? Okay. Just want to thank you for your time. I'd be happy to attend to any questions anybody has.
Mr. Mumgard.
Okay, I'm trying to boil it down.
Yeah.
Are you telling us that the Life Safety Code, the 101 Life Safety Code 2000 edition, does not have grandfather rights in it?
It does not. No, the difference between the NFPA codes and the international codes is that those codes comply to existing buildings. That's how, for instance, today, fire marshal comes out and does annual inspections on assemblies, churches, things like that. And they can come in today out of the blue and all of a sudden now make you put doors in that they never had to in the past. The building code doesn't do that.
Okay, and I understand that the building code doesn't do that, in part because of the economic hardship on the property owner.
Definitely.
And secondly, its intent is to catch those defects as the building, as things happen with the building, remodeling, etc.
Right. Yep.
How does the life safety code differ doesn't it have the same ability?
It does not have the same ability, no. I mean, it still would be inspected and reviewed at the time of renovation, but what it gives is it gives the ability for the state fire marshal, in this case the city fire inspector, to go in and say, okay, today I realize that you've had this building this way forever, but here's what the code says. And the code says that you need to have...
Why does it do that?
Why does it do that?
Yeah, why does it not forgive existing defects?
That's a good question. I mean, that's how the NFPA adopted it. I think a lot of it has to do with the safety of individuals. This code obviously is a big proponent, would be the International Fire Chiefs Associations, things like that. And so they're big pushes to do that. And I can give you examples of things of businesses that's happened in Papillion, and that's kind of why we drummed up this whole idea to let's do delegated authority, because people were being required to do things on an annual basis just out of the blue.
Okay, so let me see if I understand it. That we're considering adopting this life safety code only because it comes hand in hand with the delegation acceptance?
Yeah, in order to have delegated authority, you have to adopt the minimum code required by the state fire marshal, and this is the code that they have adopted.
And what if we don't do that?
You will not get delegated authority. The state won't grant that.
What will that mean to us on a day-to-day basis?
Less work for city staff, but then business owners and designers are still having to go down to Lincoln to submit their drawings, and inspections are happening in Lincoln versus all being in-house with the city.
The state will run the show, not us.
Which is what they're doing today. Yes.
Okay, well, how does the adoption of the International Fire Code along with the safety code, how does that change?
Well, what the International Fire Code does, it gives you what's called, I would call an alternative means. It gives another adopted standard that the city staff could use to say, okay, it may not comply 100% with the life safety code, but we have another adopted standard that's recognized nationally, and other jurisdictions in Omaha are using it, for instance. And so it's leveling the playing field, in my opinion, because if it's easier for a business to build in Omaha or in Lincoln or even in Bellevue, but it's harder to build in Papillion because of the fact they don't have that same waiver, if you want to call it a waiver.
I don't particularly see the building codes as development incentives. I see them as protection to the public.
Right.
So if we adopt both the fire code and the life safety code together, people can choose which one they comply with?
Well, in theory, the state fire marshal says you have to use the 2000 life safety code. That's what they say. That's their standard. You have to use that. But I can tell you that the other 9 that have this aren't doing that.
They say as long as you comply with one of them.
With one of the codes, yep. They've put language in their ordinance that says, you can, and in fact, there's a whole nother code that the NFPA has. It's 101A, which specifically talks about alternative means and methods of construction and design and things like that. That would be what I would probably adopt along with the International Fire Code, and then you could have a system that would work.
Okay, well, then are people, if the state is imposing this, are other cities across the state doing what is being proposed here and only adopting the life safety code?
No, as you can see in that example I put up there.
Well, you showed me the ones that aren't.
Yeah.
But how about the ones that aren't listed here? Are there people adopting it and suffering the defect that you're talking about?
No, the ones on the list are the only cities that have delegated authority from the fire marshal. If it's not on that list, the fire marshal still does it. And so all of them adopted the 2001 life safety or the 2000 life safety code, but they also adopted the International Fire Code at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Do we have any other opponents? Do we have any staff discussion? Mr. Craig, do you want to give a staff perspective?
Sure. Start by the big picture as we looked at it was.
First of all, since nobody else has come up, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I'll hold you just for a second. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve ordinance 1689? Then we'll get into council discussion. We do that. Oh yeah. Hold on. Thinking procedurally, because we are going to recommend the waiver that was mentioned. I'll do that one second. Go ahead and with your comment, and then I'll pick up the procedural.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Brian Craig, Papillion Building Department. The idea of adopting only the life safety code came about to apply the same rules that businesses and new construction are under today with the State Fire Marshal's Office. We did consider, certainly Mr. Arney had the advantage of having several years' experience in that role, and this being his baby originally. But we did consider adopting the IFC as well, but we considered that to be something we should do in conjunction when the State Fire Marshal does that transition on their own, since they're delegating the authority to provide the inspection and review services to our office and the fire department. Again, I'll reiterate, the intent was to apply the same rules that the state does currently, and that's the 2000 Life Safety Code. We considered an ability to allow and consider alternative design, much like we do with the IBC, the building code. If someone were to submit alternative design that falls maybe under the 2012, currently we're in the 2006, we would consider that and review that for compliance, and we may allow that currently. And so I think in practice, we intend to allow alternative designs if they're considered better and safer design. As far as the comment on applying to pre-existing buildings, that certainly applies now to the State Fire Marshal's office with their annual inspections. But that's something in practice that the fire department and building department would have to figure out what they want to do procedurally from an operations perspective for the inspector.
Thank you. Chief Bose, did you have any comments?
The only thing I'll add to what Brian said was that by receiving the delegated authority from the state, we need to adopt the 2000 Life Safety Code as was stated. It's an old, outdated code, but it does give us the local discretion to look at the alternatives that Brian mentioned. So if somebody comes in with, say, 2012 International Fire Code change that's different than the 2000 Life Safety Code, we can consider that. So we have the discretion, the freedom to do that, having delegated authority, whereas the state tends to stick only with that 2000 Life Safety Code. So it's an attempt to get local control over that process.
Thank you. Mr. Mumgard.
Well, okay, I'll ask the staff, either one of you. Well, do you disagree with the view that if we adopt both of them, the only change would be that people could comply with one, they don't have to comply with both? How does that end up at a different position than what you're talking about?
I think in the meetings we've had regarding adopting the IFC simultaneously would be, does that provide a confusing set of rules for an applicant? If they know that this is the minimum standard, the 2000 Life Safety Code, but if they choose to offer an alternative design, we would consider it. I think that's the position we were taking.
Well, okay, but I look at the list and we have 7 cities. 2 of them are neighbors. Two of them, being the biggest cities in the state, have done it the other way that you say is going to be confusing. Are you saying that the people in Papillion are dumber than the people in Omaha, so that we'll get confused?
No, sir, I think you misunderstood.
Well, but what's the?
I think I've
let me be fair. Let me
advice.
be fair. How is it that they can achieve? They do this and seem to achieve an end that's good, and we can't.
I don't think that staff is opposed to council suggesting we adopt that as well. We anticipated that the State Fire Marshal would be moving toward that new code, and we thought adopting a cleaner one code book tonight may be best, but certainly I think Chief Bose would agree that we're open to, if council considers the IFC an important adoption as well, we're not opposed to that.
Well, I guess I look at this and say, well, if this is the way the rest of the state is doing it, and there's no disadvantage in doing it this way, why pick an alternative? Why do it differently?
When you talk alternative and doing it different.
Well, I guess, excuse me, I mean, if they're doing a dual code system, why should we choose a one code system that may have ramifications that we're not quite sure of? Why are we deviating from the norm?
Part of the logic was actually not to deviate to the norm, but keep the norm. What the norm today is in Papillion is the State Fire Marshal is doing it under the 2000. If we take the delegated authority, as was mentioned, we're taking exactly what the state has. So in theory, nothing changes because we're taking the same code. And actually a little bit less regulation, which is one of the goals as well. It does not prevent us in the future, whether that's near term or long term, to adopt the others as we move forward. This does not prevent prevent us from doing what the others are doing, but right now what it does is it keeps us in the same position we're today with what the state's doing.
Well, okay,
with local
that
control.
brings me to another question of, well, as he said, what's the rush? What happens if we don't waive the third reading and we don't adopt anything for, let's say, a month, month and a half? What happens?
Any, Chief? Because it's under yours. Part of the intent of the waiver is when we go to third reading, that puts it 15 days after public hearing. When we adopt this, there's automatically a 15-day waiting period, and we've done that in other cases where we do something that after final vote, there's a 15-day waiting period. There's other precedents where we waived the third hearing. The remonstrance period with real estate transfers is another example where we've got a built-in waiting period, and this has it. So if we don't waive, we'll have a vote on 7/15. If we waive, this becomes effective 7/16.
Yeah, and I kind of try to consistently follow the philosophy that I don't vote to waive extra readings unless there's no reason for extra readings. But if there's questions out there, oppositions out there, legitimate questions to be answered, then time is our ally.
Part of the time is service quality as well. The fire marshal right now is not necessarily responsive to our time frames and with the development boom we're having. We'll finish our reviews, we'll issue occupancy permits, and people are still waiting for the fire marshal to show up. By us getting local control, we can do those fire inspections while we're doing our occupancy inspections and not hold up development.
Well, if I understand it right, the same rules are going to apply whether we adopt this tonight or we don't adopt this for a month.
Other than during the period we've adopted it, we can be responsive and be out there doing our inspections.
That would be the only change of who goes out and inspects.
Which is the key part of why we want delegated authority.
Okay, but it's also a question of, well, okay, how long have we been doing it with the fire marshal making the inspections, and now all of a sudden the next 2, 3, 4 weeks is going to be a critical time period that people are going to die? Is that what we're hearing?
We've been aiming for mid-July. It's taken us a while to get all the pieces in place. It's not a hard and fast rule that we have to have it by July 16th. It's just been our target date for a while now. And the way the process moves, it just happened to fall this way. We could delay it. The only drawback from my perspective that I would say delaying it, developers know that we're going to be seeking delegated authority. It's out in their world, and they're excited and anxious for that to happen. And we've been letting them know that mid-July is a time frame that we've been looking at, so they're gearing their projects towards us being able to do the plans reviews and the inspections after in mid-July. It's not an emergency necessarily. It's just a target date that we've had.
Okay, well, I'm going to again be simplistic because that's the only way I can handle this. That if really the only difference we're talking about is whether a code, the rules apply to existing buildings as opposed to new buildings, and the rule that we're talking about adopting would then apply to existing buildings rather than new buildings, then developers or people who are talking about building new buildings, it shouldn't matter to them. They're going to comply with the life safety code because they have to.
What the code they comply to is not the issue, because it's the same code either way. What the issue is with the development community right now is we're in the busiest period of development we've ever had. And it comes back to responsiveness, which is exactly what I want with local control. Right now, if they call for a fire inspection, it could be a week or so before that fire marshal comes out to inspect, and then if there's an issue and they have to come back for a reinspection, we could be out there. We could have a business open literally probably 2 weeks earlier than with delegated authority than with fire marshal control.
Okay, well, that's a good thing. Are you telling me then that if we adopt this, it'll mean something positive to the new buildings, but because you have this discretion you're talking about, it won't mean anything negative to existing buildings?
That's correct. That was well said, yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I can go back to your earlier point, if you don't mind, on the comparison with the other cities, I look at this as baby steps. We're entering a new world in fire code inspections and plans reviews. we felt safest in adopting exactly what the state has. The state anticipates, perhaps as early next year, they'll be moving up to the 2012 NFPA code, at which time we would also, just to match state law. So we're going into the 2000 code right now. We could have easily made a pitch for 2006, 2009, either NFPA or International Fire Code, but this was the safest one that we know well. The building department also knows the variations in that because they've been working with it. It's the 2006, I think, International Building Code. So they know that the variations that are available in more recent codes. So it's just a way of getting in the door, getting comfortable with it, then moving up in which code we adopt. And a lot of that will be driven by what the state does and what the market demands.
Okay, well, I'll tell you that I don't disagree with your goal. I think your logic may have some validity, but I'm not going to vote to waive the third reading because I think there's sufficient question out there that it's worthwhile to follow the established process that we apply to many, many other things. So thank you.
And again, the reminder that the reason we want delegated authority is purely for customer service and economic development, so we can be responsive instead of waiting around for the fire marshal. And there are examples where with like remonstrance periods, we do waive because the time frames end up matching anyway. We'll close the public hearing. I will call for a motion to waive the third reading for ordinance 1689. Do we have a motion? Motion by Councilman Ingberg. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Do we have proponents? Do we have any opponents? And if you'd state your name for the record again.
Yeah,
and this is specific to the waiver of the third reading.
Todd Arney, and I'll say it again, all the examples you've given of waiving of third readings are all beneficial to the city, whether it's buying property, financial. I agree with Mr. Montgomery. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. I'd be happy to sit down and answer those questions, but I think waiving the third reading now is horrible.
Thank you. And as far as the beneficial economic development is beneficial, do we have any opponents? Other opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote. And this does require a supermajority. This is just to waive the third reading. It does require a supermajority.
Two yeas, 5 nays. Nays by council members Klug, Stube, Florence, Mumgard, and Gaines.
Motion does fail. Thank you. Next is item E2, Ordinance 1695, an ordinance to amend Chapter 205, Article 2, Section 11 of the Papillion Zoning Code having to do with development definitions, specifically to add the definition of repetitive loss and to modify definitions of substantial damage and substantial improvement related to floodplain management, and to amend Chapter 205, Article 5, Section 43 of the Papillion Zoning Code in its entirety having to do with site development regulations related to building and impervious coverage requirements for the agricultural district and to provide for an effective date. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Do we have proponents? Do we have any opponents? Close the public hearing. Next is item F1. Resolution 140091, a resolution to approve the Public Works Facility guaranteed maximum price for leader construction. Do we have a motion to approve resolution R140091? Motion by Councilwoman Klug. Second by Councilman Stube. Do we have proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item F2, Resolution R140097, a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve an application for moving a building or structure permit to move a building from its present location at 720 Fenwick Street, Papillion, Nebraska, to their future location at 7909 Reed Street. The applicant is John Brennan. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Do we have proponents? And he is here if we have questions. Do we have any opponents? Close the public hearing. Do you have a motion to approve resolution R140097? Motion by Councilman Jaworski, second by Councilman Ingberg. Any council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next, F3, Resolution R140099, a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve a preliminary plat for the property legally described as a replatting of Lot 80, Settlers Creek, in the southwest quarter of Section 24, Township 14 North, Range 12 East, generally located at Ridgewood Drive and Crest Ridge Drive. The applicant is Rogers Development. This is a public hearing. I'll open it. Do we have proponents?
Terry Atkins, Lamprey Niersen and Associates, 14710 West Dodge Road, here on behalf of the applicant to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution R140099? Motion by Councilman Stubbe. Second by Councilwoman Klug. Any council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item F4, Resolution R140100. This is public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve a second amendment to the Market Point Addition Mixed-Use Development Agreement for the property legally described as Market Point Addition, Market Point Addition Replat 1, Point Addition Replat 2, Market Point Addition Replat 4, and Market Point Addition Replat 6, generally located in the southeast corner of 72nd Street and Giles Road. The applicant is Lane 4 Property Group. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Proponents.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. With me tonight is Mr. Owen Buckley and his son Brandon Buckley, and if you recall, Owen was the original developer of the Market Point subdivision. Also with me tonight is Katie Underwood of Olson Associates that would answer any questions regarding any traffic concerns, but this is a simple request to amend the existing mixed-use development agreement to allow for a fourth fast food restaurant with a drive-through at this particular shopping center. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? Close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve resolution? Oh, go ahead and come on up. And if you'd state your name for the record.
Randy Burns, 811 Roland Drive, Papillion, Nebraska. I was at the Planning Commission meeting, and I really thought twice about coming tonight because I know a lot of people will say they're going to do what they want to do. You know, that may not be the agreement here amongst people in this room, but I think there are people that thinks that happens. One of the questions that was posed to me that night by Planning Commission members, do we have anything in writing? I said, kind of kick myself now for saying, yes, we do have something in writing. Mr. Buckley signed an agreement to do 3. Yes, there was 19 hours of testimony. Yes, the Supreme Court says it's a valid development. That's not what I'm here about. I want you guys to honor the 3. He said 3 fast food restaurants with drive-thrus. That was the agreement. Nobody forced him to sign it. Nobody forced the city to sign it. That was the agreement. Now he comes back 10 years later. Planning Commission members say, well, nobody here to talk against it, so everybody must be for it. That's another reason I have to come out here tonight, is because if I don't come tonight, it's just deemed by default that everybody's for it. I'd offer an alternative reason that why people don't come. They're busy. They truly don't. You get the letters saying that there's something about the property, but it doesn't tell you what it is. It doesn't make it easy for the person to see what is trying to happen there. All I want is to honor the agreement. It's a valid development, yes, I'm not arguing that. Supreme Court said so. It's just honor the 3 fast food restaurants. We have 72nd Street as your entrance point. A number of years back, I was at a hearing where somebody wanted to put Come and Go over on Cornhusker Road, and everybody said, oh, that's the entrance to Papillion on that road. Here now is what you have up there on 72nd. You have Village Inn and King's on the one side and all the other food on the other side. You're becoming a fast food road on 72nd Street. You got the big box there, which was ultimately what was wanted. That's your sales tax. Now honor the agreement of 3 fast food restaurants. I can't help it that what came in there didn't fill the square footage that he talked about maxing out, but that was a number. The traffic consultant was commissioned by them. I was thinking about this cutting the grass tonight. I said, I'd like to see where the city commissions a study, bills the developer for it, and it truly is an impartial ruling. He pays for the study. I'd like to ask him, do they ever find it contrary to what the developer wants? So honor the 3 that was agreed to. No harm, no foul on that. That's what we said. It was going to be upscale. We have, what, 10 eateries there, 3 big boxes, a shoe store, general nutrition or something like that. It's not what he talked about. And putting another fast food doesn't make it upscale. I know that's a subjective term, but as a person that lives in the community, it's not what I envisioned that he said he was going to give us with upscale. Honor the agreement, 3 fast food restaurants in his valid development. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other opponents? Yes. And if you'd state your name for the record.
Diane Casada, 100 Roland Drive, 007 Roland Drive. I am opposing this. I'm with Mr. Burns. We have enough food. It's just way too much. And it was handed to us as an upscale, which I knew it wasn't going to have Von Mar in it and all of that, but a little better than this. I want to bring up a couple of issues, though. Am I allowed to do that besides this?
As long as they're on this topic.
Yes. Okay. One is the lights. That place is lit up like a used car lot all night long, and there's no reason to have it. Kohl's is a nice neighbor store. They put their lights down at night. Panera, I am directly behind Panera. The lights on Panera, Lowe's, and the next, I think they want another strip mall at the other end.
You're talking parking lights or stoplights?
No, on the buildings.
Oh, that's off topic. If you're talking traffic and that would be on topic.
Well, we don't need any more traffic. We don't need, but there's an issue with all the trash, the noise in it. It just is going to bring more disruption. We took a hit for the city to have this by our neighborhood. We didn't want it, but we got it, and that's fine. But I do think we should have, I do think the lights are too bright and everything here, and I also agree with the trash is loud and too much traffic. You don't have any downtime here. It's just noise all the time. And you get in your house and you have a reminder because the trucks are moving your pictures like this every so often. So it isn't, I don't care for it at all, I'm sorry. And I don't use it that much, but a lot of people do. So no more food, please. Put something else in there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other opponents?
Joan Williams, 1017 Michael Drive. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I agree with Randy and Diane. That's not my immediate neighborhood. I don't have to see the buildings. I can go drive a different way, but I think we have more than enough fast food restaurants in Papillion. There are enough fat people around. Not that I'm opposed to that, but I mean, if we want to put in a restaurant, fair enough. But I was at the meeting 10 years ago when Randy was there. We were promised high end. I agree, it's subjective. But I mean, can we just have another bay where they have offices or something else, but no more fast food, please? I mean, the traffic is horrendous. When we first moved out there, I was naive to think that cornfields would remain cornfields. But now traffic, the volume is up like 200% or more. And I think it's just an accident waiting to happen. So I know the developers want to finish up and sign off and go off to the next state, the next town. But I mean, please consider it. It might not be a neighborhood. Who wants to be smelling foul oil or whatever smells? I mean, there are about 10 food restaurants in that area. We don't need any more. So let them go back and come back with something that's more presentable that will make everyone happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other opponents? Go ahead and close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve resolution R140100?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Councilman Mumgarden. Second by Councilman Gaines. Council discussion. Mr. Mumgarden.
Okay, Mr. Job or Mr. Buckley? All right, I was here when that agreement was made.
Yes.
I'd like to honor an agreement if there's a reason to honor an agreement. Let's assume there was a reason for the restriction of 3 rather than 4. What do you see that reason being?
Well, I guess I wanted to explain that. The limitation was really 3 lots or maximum of 5% of the 550,000 square feet. 5% of 550,000 square feet is 27,500. So we are currently only at 10,456 square feet of fast food with drive-throughs. Okay, this 4th restaurant will only add another 3,585. square feet, so 3,585 more square feet. So we're well under the 27,500 maximum. The reason why it was limited to 3 is remember when you're doing these traffic studies, when you're doing a shopping center in a mixed-use development, you really don't know what your end uses are. You kind of project what they are. There's a list of permitted uses, and you sort of base it on a mix of uses that would be consistent with a shopping center in this particular location. It just so happened that our traffic study only showed 3 fast food restaurants, well under the maximum of 5% of the 550. So what was required by the planning department, and we agreed to do, obviously, to put the 4th one in there, which only increases the square footage up to about 14,000 square feet, if my math is correct. Yeah, 10,400 with another 3,500 attached. We did an updated traffic study, and it showed that the level of service is not impacted by the addition of a 4th freestanding fast food restaurant. So I guess the explanation is we were well within the square footage. It just so happened the original traffic study called for 3. We are well within the maximum with 4, and there's no impact to the traffic.
Okay, you're saying you're still going to be within the agreement because
Yes.
it's an alternative.
Correct.
Okay, the planning director, Mr. Sturzma, do you agree that's the way that the agreement was? It was either numbers or square footage?
Well, the agreement lists both. It lists number of uses, number of high traffic generators, which include restaurants, drive-through banks, and convenience stores. That's how we generally look at high traffic generators. The reason we put limits on those in our mixed use agreements, certainly there is some desire to create a mix of uses, but the real reason, or the most important reason, is to try to limit the peak hour traffic. If you put all restaurants within a development, they all have the same peak hour, you create a traffic flow problem, at least at certain times of the day. And so that's why we have those limitations in our mixed use agreement. If this area were zoned general commercial, for example, all of the uses would be permitted by right, and so you could fill the whole thing up with fast food restaurants if that's what the market dictated. We wouldn't have any control over the traffic. So when the request was made to amend the mixed use agreement, and we in the planning department and engineering department were asked, would you support this? Our response was, well, prove to us through a traffic study that that there won't be an adverse impact. They've done that. I think the engineer can speak to the traffic study and how we vetted that. And so from a traffic perspective, we didn't object to it. But obviously the reason we have public hearings and bring these things to planning commission and council is to look at all of the subjective considerations.
Well, okay, I guess I'll agree with you that I look at it and read it and say, well, if both the number of facilities is in there and the square footage is in there, what's the purpose of putting both of those in there unless they're alternatives? Because they don't seem to apply other than as an alternative. But then I look at it, and I'll ask you and the developer this, how did we get so out of whack with the numbers and the square footage that the 3, you hit the 3 and you're so significantly below the square footage? How did we go so far off?
Mr. Buckley will answer that particular question.
I can attempt to answer that. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice
been
to be
a long
back
time
here.
since you've been here.
You all look exactly the same, and I've aged 10 years. So, no, appreciate being here tonight. Owen Buckley with Lane 4 Property Group, Kansas City, Missouri. A couple things. One, the restaurant business, for example, what was supposed to be on that corner originally was a Bennigan's, 9,500 feet. And never happened. And the recession hit, and very few big restaurants are being built today. The fast foods and the fast casuals, as they like to call them, are the restaurants that are popular now and being built. That's not to say that a big Ponderosa or Golden Corral or something like that couldn't still be built today. And I'm sure that those will come back in vogue at some point. The lot has been empty for 8 years. And so we're saying, okay, how do we get this filled back up? This is an opportunity to do so. We went and looked at the traffic, but that's how the number got out of whack. With the restaurants, just aren't as big as the big restaurants aren't being built today. So the smaller ones are.
And does that correlate to, apparently that correlates to traffic then?
Yeah,
if you got a
would,
smaller restaurant, you're
well,
not getting
yeah,
as much
but
traffic.
I'm not sure. You still got people coming through the drive-throughs, but according to our traffic study that was done, which I hope was objective, they're supposed to be, it states that the difference would be somewhat insignificant. Okay. So it's a way to finalize the project. It's been 8 years. It'll do somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million in sales, most likely. Restaurants such as this, it'll adhere to all the architectural guidelines. I went back and looked at what we did promise back 10 years ago, and it was exactly 10 years ago in the summer of 1994 or 2004 that we were talking about what was going to be at this project, and we had 200 of these, each of these brochures. They're 6 to 8 pages each, which have questions and answers. And I literally went down to our storage unit and pulled them out of the box and read them after the Planning Commission. And I read through every one of them. And everything that we said we were going to do, we did. And we said that the type of retailers that you would see here would be similar to what you see at Oakview Mall and 72nd Dodge area. The architectural, the landscaping, the 600 trees, the architectural elements that Walmart was designed especially for Market Point. We also stated that it was our opinion that home construction would continue and home values would continue to go up around the property, and that's very evident when you drive around, especially to the east and to the south. So we're trying to finish the project. We're trying to do it right. I was very, very proud to drive through the project. We no longer own the project. It was sold right as the recession started, or right after it started in 2008. The group that owned it, that we were affiliated with, chose to sell it to a national company. They own it. We own the pad. We own the outlot that we're discussing and trying to finish in fashion here.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was wondering, let's assume that the neighbors have a valid complaint that the lighting is excessive at night and something could be done about that. You're telling us you're not the one that can do it, right?
Well, but I'm also telling you that we agreed that we would enter into an easements, covenants, and restriction agreement, which governs all the tenants and building owners within the Market Point project, and it covers things like that.
Who enforces that?
The Walmart, the Lowe's, the Kohl's, and the developer.
Is that, Mr. Sturzman, is that something that we could enforce, or that we could have some influence on? Let's assume the neighbors have a point, that the lights are bad. What can we do about it?
But the lights are per the plan too. There was special lighting and great stake that went into shielding the light and that was put forth by the city and the requirements, and we did adhere to those.
Oh, okay, to the extent you have any impact on that, you've heard the complaint, and I'd suggest that it gets passed on to the appropriate person. And then Mr. Sturzman, I'd ask that you look into what can the city do to assist the citizens there. Thank you.
Mr. Jaworski.
Well, I was on this council too 10 years ago, and we did make a promise with 3 restaurants, and that was one of the things that I was pretty adamant about, because I didn't want it to fill up with fast foods, and I'm still not. I'm not going to support this because of that. I gave my word 10 years. I'm sticking to my word. It still looks pretty good. I agree with that, but also you promised us, Owen, back then 10 years ago, that you would not allow them roads to go bad. Them roads are in bad shape, and how many times have I come to you, Marty, and talked to you about that, and it's just a rolling wheel. Nobody's taking responsibility for that. And I know you sold that place, but when you sell that place, the roads got to go along.
You're talking about the concrete paver.
The pavers are falling out.
Yeah.
It's been a nightmare. So some of the promises haven't been kept up, but I'm going to promise the people that came up here, I know I'm only one vote, but the other people that have been sitting on here, I hope we all agree to what we said 10 years ago is 3 fast food restaurants, and I'm going to stick to my word. So that's my take on that.
Do we have any other council discussion? Mr. Florence.
So kind of along those lines, I think back to conversations we've had here recently. We had the folks over at, where we had the conversation about putting in the school, and the people said, well, we bought here at the development, and it wasn't going to, this doesn't include you guys, sorry. So I don't have any more discussion for you guys. And so at the end of the day, the school district wanted what they wanted, the developer wanted what they wanted, and so we said, okay, well, forget it. And we just kind of didn't do anything. And now we have folks here, and I'm conflicted because part of me is very, very pro-business, but the other part says, people thought there were going to be 3 restaurants in upscale. I don't think anybody would think a Panda Express is upscale. And really what it sounds like what happened is you had 3 restaurants going in, probably upscale, larger units, and they didn't happen. So you put in 3 smaller ones. Now, I tend to agree. 3's the numbers, 3's the number, and something else can go in there. So I won't vote for this either for just those reasons. I think a deal was made, an understanding existed, and I understand things fall apart in business, but I think we have to look after the people who, they didn't look at the square footage, they just heard units. Let's face it, that's how people think. And so they think 3 units are there, and so I think we are obligated to stick with that.
Ms. Klug.
Thank you. We've done a lot of discussions with different ways that we want things developed. We want them to look specific ways. Sometimes we get real specifics and we get what we want with the bricks, and we get the nicer looks, and we get all the trees that we want. And that's all super important. But we also still have to remember that what came before all of the new Walmarts and the upscale look on it and all of the trees, and that was the neighbors that were living across from it. When we talked to those neighbors and we said, we really need this for the community, we need you to understand this really is for the betterment of the whole city, we did say certain things were going to happen. One of those that I remember discussing was that we wanted to limit the number of fast foods and freestanding foods, that we didn't want it to turn into just an eating location. We wanted a lot of variety in there. I still think we need that variety. We have our fast foods in there already, and it is time to keep pushing. The economy's coming back. I believe there will be other opportunities. So I'm going to vote against this and stick with what we originally said.
Mr. Gaines.
Well, out of respect, since I wasn't on this council, when they originally made this agreement, I'm going to have to vote against it also to respect the decisions that the other council members made and the promises that were made before. So.
Any other council discussion? Please vote.
One yea, 6 nays. Nays by council members Jaworski, Klug, Stube, Ingberg, Florence, and Gaines.
Motion fails. Next is item F5, Resolution R140101, a resolution to amend the master fee schedule pertaining to fire inspection fees. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution R140101? Motion by Councilman Jaworski. Second by Councilman Stube. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? If you'd state your name for the record again.
Yep, Todd Arney. I swear I'm not being a pain in the neck, but here's what I really want to help you guys on. When you look at the staff report, it talks about the potential to have third-party plan reviews do these because of workloads, but you've capped the plan review fees at $1,000 maximum. That's a $20,000 billing permit fee. We get hundreds of those through Papillion. So any billing permit fee over $20,000, if you have to send that out to a consultant, we'll lose money because we'll be paying the consultant. So I would recommend putting in, if it goes out to a consultant, then you're going to pay what the consultant fee was. So that's the only comment I have.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other proponents? Any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next is item F6, Resolution R140102. A resolution to accept a dedication of street right-of-way for a 150 square foot of triangular shaped property, 15 feet by 20 feet, adjacent to Settlers Creek Drive and Cornhusker Road from Lot 2, Settlers Creek. Do you have a motion to approve Resolution R140102? Motion by Councilman Jaworski. Second by Councilwoman Klug. Do we have proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is committee reports. Public facilities met last week. Any report?
Thank you. We did meet last week. We did have some very preliminary discussions and information gathering about the community center that we have discussed at one point. Just want to let all council members know that we are very preliminary. We are simply looking at what was it we were thinking about multiple years ago when this discussion was brought forward, and trying to lay a path work so that we make sure and include everybody and every citizen in what's going on as we move forward and look at, do we want it and how do we proceed with it. The other item we looked at was we were working with the library board. We had a member of them and one of their staff members attend with us. We had some great discussion about the future of the library and how to best meet the citizens' needs. And right now we are waiting for the library board to get back to us with some information before we can make our next steps to decide how to continue to serve the public best. That's the end of the report, sir.
Thank you very much. And Finance and Administration met tonight. Any update from that? Mr. Ingberg.
Excuse me. Yes, Mayor, we met this evening with one agenda item at your direction. We met with two members of the library board. Unfortunately, Robin could not attend, the person that runs the library, but we reviewed their budget requests. And all council people that attended had several questions and wanted some clarification in some areas. And ultimately, we decided to recommend back to you, Mayor, that we will put together a brief report that will indicate anyone's questions or concerns we have about their budget request. And I assured the library board we would forward that same information for them so they could take it back to Robin and review it, and perhaps get some answers back for us before we vote on the final budget.
Very good. Thank you very much. Do you have any comments from the floor? No comments from the floor. Any council comments? Mr. Jaworski.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Dan and Carrie and everybody that was involved with this Fitbit thing, because it really paid off for me, and I think it's paid off a lot for Dan. I think it was a great. I'm just talking. Look at the way he looks, and look at Jeff. Jeff would look good if he'd shave that ugly looking thing that's on his face. But other than that, I would just like to say thanks that who got this started. I think Carrie did, and she came to you, and this was a super thing to do, and I just want to say thanks.
And we've got an active wellness committee, employee group, so they're doing great work. So thank you for that comment. Mr. Florence.
You know, I want to go back to something that Mr. Hoynes started with regarding the interlocal and the budget. And I will have to give credit to everybody all the way around for doing a great job with the budget. I was in that meeting, and will confess the first thing I wanted to see is how far we were off the budget. And they were right on. They did a great job. So.
And you're referencing specifically the fire.
I am, the
Yep.
fire. Yep.
Well, Councilman Florence, we knew you'd ask that question, so.
Any other council comments? Some updates from the last couple of weeks. I had several meetings with Library Board Paul Schroeder as we were looking to fill the vacancies on the library, so appreciate the cooperation with him. Did go to the Lions Club and made a presentation in regards to Veterans Park. They were interested in that project, and I think maybe trying to find a role in that. Ms. Myers and I also met with some of the executives from Pinpoint Communications. That's the new company that relocated their headquarters to Papillion. And we're looking for some ways to cooperate with them. Attended the Sarpy County Economic Development Board meeting, got some updates on what's going on regionally, and they do have a new person that will be supporting Sarpy County, working with Toby, and we're going to be meeting them tomorrow, so we'll get you that information. Also attended, along with Mr. Mumgard, the celebration for Laura Jean O'Connor. She retired as the Senior Center Director, been involved for a long number of years. As mentioned, we had the fire department budget review today. That was with La Vista and the Rural Fire Board as well. And again, a good cooperative effort, and that's coming in well within budget of what was planned. A couple of dates to keep in mind for your calendar. July 10th, there is another ribbon cutting for Papillion Business Paragon Dental at 4 o'clock. July 13th, we've got the triathlon. If you haven't been to that, that's a great event to watch, and they always need volunteers, and council members are welcome to volunteer for that. That's 7:30 in the morning on Sunday the 13th. The 20th anniversary for Papillion Bay was rescheduled. That's now July 20th. Put that on your calendar. And then tentatively August 1st, a groundbreaking for Public Works. And then as Mr. Hoynes mentioned, Civil Service did select a consultant, so the chief selection process will be gearing up now that they've officially met. That was just yesterday or day before. So that process is just getting going. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Councilman Gaines, second by Councilman Stubbe. Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
We are adjourned. Thank you.